Hello, Tony. How are you this Friday?
Hello, Tim. I am great and I am ready for the weekend.
Ready to rock and roll? Um, this is so nice about a Friday show, right? We get to hang back and relax on Fridays and just talk about our week and talk about some Jamstack stuff. So, are you ready for some news?
Let's go.
Alrighty then.
This is Jamstack Friday with TNT.
Cause I'm TNT, I'm dynamite.
All right, we got some interesting news that came out this past 2 weeks. Starting with the first one is Cloudflare Pages is now general availability. So what is Cloudflare Pages? Cloudflare Pages, think of them as an offering by Cloudflare, something like Netlify or Vercel, where you can build a really fast static website and deploy them to a place where you can serve them from. So Azure has static websites, Netlify has their own platform, Vercel has their own platform where DevOps is all built in. With Cloudflare Pages now, you're getting that functionality as well from this specific CDN. Gatsby image plugin has been updated. And it's really interesting that we discussed last week comparison between Next.js and Gatsby, and we went into the details of image in each one of these frameworks. And now we get this guide to all new Gatsby image plugin. Really interesting. I'm curious if Gatsby team is watching our videos and they have released this this interesting breakdown of everything related to this plugin. All right, moving on. Tailwinds version 2.1 has been released. Check it out. I really like this CSS framework. If you're new to CSS, I would not recommend starting with Tailwinds. I would probably recommend going to Bootstrap or something well known to everyone. But if you have been working with Bootstrap for a long time and you want to get started with something more advanced, you should definitely give it a try with Tailwinds. Flowing into the next news that we have is Storybook 6.2 has been released. This is a really great tool for you to store your components in one place. And if you're a big enterprise and if you're interested to share your component between your teams and everybody work on it, this can be a really nice solution for you. Netlify has released this new feature now in your account. You can go in and select under your account on the right side, Netlify Labs, enable it. And one of the features that they have released is dark mode. I'm a fan of dark mode, so this was really nice. Well, I really like that. Next, Uniform Dev has went through a little redesign, so check it out and let us know what you think. Something that we always run into when we talk about Jamstack sites, specifically when we talk about Next.js framework and we talk about security authentication. This is a very interesting library that works with Next.js. Give it a try. You don't need to write all of those complex scenarios. You're logging in, logging out, registration, and so on. You can just take advantage of this framework and maybe eventually even extend it. Give it a try. This will take care of your authentication with your Next.js applications. And last but not least is the style components. So we build these very fast performance sites now with Jamstack architecture approach, and we would like to add some charts, some graphs to our site. And because I'm a React I've been with React now past few years, so diving into Next.js. So this library is for React and it has a TypeScript support. So give it a try and add some cool graphics, cool charts to your web pages. If you like this news, if you like what we're sharing with you, give it a thumbs up. Let us know in comments what you think and what kind of news you would like to see more. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next week.
Thank you, Tony. That was some cool new stuff. Hey, so we talked earlier a little bit about how often we should do this show. So what do you think? What would be interesting here?
I think we should refer to our viewers and you let
All
us
right.
know in comments how often you want to see it. Every 2 weeks, every week, And what kind of content you want to see more? What would you like us to talk more about? What kind of news you're more interested in?
And you know what? Maybe it's also the length. Maybe it should be a 10-minute thing. Maybe it should be an hour thing. Anyways, we're completely flexible and open to all sorts of comments, whatever you want. So, shall we get into our subject of the day?
Let's do it. Let's talk
Yeah,
about
let me
some
just
architecture.
exactly. So today we want to be talking about breaking Jamstack architectures, and just because some architectures are how everybody thinks they are, relatively cliche Jamstack stuff, but there's actually so much out there. And Tony and I have been going through a couple of use cases, and we found some fun stuff to talk about. So I think this can be pretty cool. So let me just go to the slides and see what we can do. Um, I'll be presenting a little bit, and Tony, please break in so we can have some nice
course.
conversations on this. And feel free to also put some comments in the chat of fun architectures with Jamstack that you might know about. Okay, right. What do we discuss today? Jamstack's basics refresher. So we're just going to go over Jamstack again for everyone to just go back to the basics so we all know what it is. I think most people will know, but it can never hurt, right? To go back to basics sometimes. A typical Jamstack architecture, like what do we know and love about Jamstack and what is this base?
Yep.
And then let's try to do some more dynamic Jamstack project and hopefully inspire you a little bit. And we're just going to keep it conversational and see how we can figure out more dynamic, fun stuff with the Jamstack. So, basics refresher. Are you ready for this, Tony?
Yep.
How about this? These here are my Photoshop skills. So I have this slide for a while now. It's been in my collection for a bit. So Bon Maman is like a famous jam in France. And also, I guess in the world, most people know this thing. But of course, this is the Jamstack one. But you can see it's dated because the logo is written with capitals for jam. That's no longer true. But it still fit. Anyways, I didn't have the PSD file anymore. So
Nice Photoshop skills.
Yeah. Anyways, so kind of way back in the day when I wrote this deck, it's like Jamstack created a new paradigm for application architecture. If that's true, maybe not. Like Tony, what kind of static site generators did you use back in the day?
Creating websites, uploading through FTP. That was my
You're one of those. Because
manual. But
I think I used like some Ruby automated like static site generator. I think GitHub Pages even used it back
GitHub
then.
page. The first one that I used that really I understood the concept of static site gen was Jekyll.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Super hard to first to grasp it, to understand what's happening, because you had to build out the whole dynamic functionality in there. You had to have all your settings stored in one file, and then it will during the build time it would pull from different spots and then build it out. And this is, I guess, where headless CMSs come in play. And
well, you know what? It was quite an enlightening thing and an enlightened thing back then how these guys built that software. But so Jamstack didn't really create a new paradigm. It just created new tools to redo this much easier, right? It's like Jekyll 2.0 almost.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about why you and me here, think that we most likely needed this new paradigm, or at least those new tools for static site generator, because this is one big ass slide. But basically, what a lot of those monolithical systems do, so the ones that are not Jamstack, you kind of have like the user that visits the website, and then there's this whole chunk with everything inside. So we're talking about how WordPress deals with their database, their CMS services, the web server, everything is in one chunk, right? And on its own, this is pretty decent. But there's also some drawbacks to this system, right? And so Tony, which systems that I've written down here on the top have you used yourself?
Almost everyone, except Epi server. I used every one of those except for Epi.
Yeah, I think Same for me. I've done one API server project maybe, but then I also had like Umbraco. We had Hippo. There were so many countless CMSs.
But they were good.
Yeah.
Whenever you needed a project, they were good, and everything was right there. Especially back in the day, WordPress. I mean, installation from a browser. All you had to do is set up a few configs, click next,
Yeah.
next, done.
I think when I used WordPress, it was still FTP. So that's been longer ago.
But after that, so you first upload it, but then you run through install.php,
Oh, yeah,
and that's it.
To me, that was magic, right? That PHP script that would write database configuration files and the dangers of how that would work with a PHP script and security. But anyways, it was really working well. However, there are some drawbacks to these kind of systems, and all of those written on the top, they have dealt with certain of those things that are problematic. Not all, but everybody is moving forward, right? But anyway, so what are the issues with these monoliths, as we say? Well, I'm just going to go and show all of them. There's quite a bit here, right? But the main thing that I am generally interested in is performance. And I'm not saying WordPress is slow or Sitecore is slow. They're not. They're actually fast. But it's really a lot harder to get to high performance on those systems than where on the Jamstack side, you generally get it out of the box because it's statically generated. And it never has to call an origin server. And that's, it just by default makes it easier to be faster, right?
Yeah, and when we talk about performance, I want to highlight the Lighthouse score, right? Everybody's interested in Lighthouse score. May 2021 coming up.
Yep.
And that's when Google will kick in their new algorithms. And I noticed at some point you can do as much improvement as you can in your sites with these CMS systems, but there's a ceiling that you hit, and that's it. You can't improve anymore because they're monolith, they're origin based, and you can't push it further.
Well, the only way I have known to solve that is by using a CDN in front to completely statically render that page. But then you've effectively created a static website.
Yeah.
Right. So you by default now going towards Jamstack in that sense. And by cost, I wrote that down because cost generally is that you have to buy the license of those big systems. Okay. That's a thing you do, but it's also hard to maintain price-wise, right? Let's say you host it on Azure, you have to have all these Azure instances, Azure database, Azure search. Like it's kind of there's a lot of stuff going on for you to host this thing because they have an origin. It's always on.
For even just a WordPress site, you have to have like a blog. I want to run a blog, just basic stuff, push my ideas out there.
Yeah.
I'll need a database. I will need a WordPress instance somewhere running and serving. And then the more traffic you get, you need to scale out. So
maybe multiple like content delivery servers and stuff.
Yeah, that's it will just go up super fast, the cost.
Exactly. And so actually the next one, or security and power consumption, they both kind of slot into that, right? Because if you talk about power consumption, the more servers and things you have running to get this thing out there for your public to see what your ideas are for your WordPress blog, it's always on stuff, right? Even if you don't use a certain part of your system, it's still on because it's a monolith. And this just consumes a bunch of power. And on the security end of things, there's just more... Sorry?
Plugins. Those plugins you install from Marketplace.
Dangerous, man.
You don't update them, that's it. You get SQL injections. I'm a victim of that. It happened to my whole server.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, and like there's just more surface area to attack. There's more places in the chain to be able to hack into because it's runtime dynamic, right? If it's static, there's nothing to go in. But if it's not, there you go.
It's really hard to hack an HTML page.
Certainly. Well, of course, you can do like some JavaScript XXS stuff. Of course you can.
Yeah.
There are some ways to go about it, but there's just a lot less. and it's difficult, exactly. So if you then talk about like things like scalability and flexibility, of course, all of the things we just discussed, you can do with the monolith. It's just more effort. Like, and what I really enjoy about Jamstack, the scalability thing of it is just they're static files, right? They're on a CDN edge. You just put them in more places on that edge closer to people, and scalability has been solved.
Yep.
Right? You don't need to do like multiple content delivery servers. Like all of those complicated tools that you put in front of it to say, okay, this user goes to that server, this user goes to that server, and then hope the session is sticky. Like all that stuff, gone.
Traffic
No
management,
more issues. Traffic management, all of it.
firewalls. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So like we don't need a firewall now to your content management server anymore. For example, none of that is complex. And so by flexibility, I guess, everything can be flexible. But I'm also talking about, developer experience flexibility wise. If you're in a Jamstack world, you can kind of choose your tool set easily. And you will see later on in the deck when I explain, our more inspirational architecture. That's from 2018. And actually, it's so flexible that if I wanted to modernize it to 2021, it was actually going to be really, really easy. But let's go there later.
All right.
So we actually did this monolith thing for so long. And kind of when you explain this monolith versus Jamstack to a client in a pitch, like you kind of feel like this. It's like all these drawbacks that I just explained. Why did we put those on the client? They were paying us, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous almost. So before we jump into Jamstack stuff, Tony, do you have something there?
Yeah.
still?
I just want to say, like, even though we spent so much, the previous slide, even though we spent so much time in those monolith systems,
Yeah.
they taught us a lot of things of how not to build websites. So
Yeah,
now
and
coming to
there's
Jamstack, we have a lot of
Exactly.
experience. Yeah.
And the thing is not how to not do it, because there's a lot of successful sites with them. And for me, what those systems taught me is to build a website from A to C, right? All the parts are in it. It's not just a front-end framework.
Mhm.
There's also backend, there's SEO, there's scaling, there's cloud stuff. So it did teach me everything I know now. And that makes it easier to go the Jamstack route and actually do something right. So we're not here to just say bad stuff about monoliths. They're still there. They're still a viable option, right? But let's just go into Jamstack and just recite the basics. Just, quick refresher. Okay, so the J, JavaScript. Any dynamic action in request response cycle are done with JavaScript. Everything is done on the client. Let's think on that. That's kind of true, right?
Yeah.
Either in build, you do dynamic stuff, but if you then want to do any sort of request response cycle stuff, Ajax calls, blah, 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 there are no servers, right? It's all JavaScript that talks to some API somewhere.
To an endpoint. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything is you still have server-side rendering, and you still have client-side, and you have client-side rendering. So server-side rendering happens at build time, client-side rendering.
Exactly.
You need some call to a weather API to get the weather.
For example. Yeah.
For example.
And the interesting thing about this is now, like, of course, this is this definition that I actually took this from my previous deck from 2018, right? Nowadays, I think there's a little bit more in between going on. Because what you could potentially do with, let's say, Next and Vercel is you can have a certain chunk to be dynamic, render that with a lambda function automatically, right? Because of Vercel. And then that output is cached on the CDN. So nowadays it might be slightly more, mixed up. But in essence, this is the point of the JavaScript in Jamstack, right? It's all on the client.
Yep. And you're free. You are flexible and free to do what is
If you want to do Angular and React and jQuery in one app, go for it. I don't suggest it, but,
Yeah.
Okay, let's go APIs. All server-side processes or database actions are abstracted into reusable APIs, accessed only by JavaScript. Okay, so APIs kind of become microservices when you read it like this. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I guess. I guess this is like, for example, you have backend developers, and they're like,
Mhm.
okay, what do I do now with all this Jamstack? I might not
Yeah,
be not be interested to learn JavaScript, and I want to continue writing my code and some backend stuff because I don't believe JavaScript is secure, some sort of stuff. Then
sure,
they can
sure.
take advantage of this area of Jamstack and focus on building APIs, making them
Mm.
secure, exposing them, and allowing front-end developers or developers out there on the web to consume them. So
And this, you make an interesting point because you're kind of defining backend developers a little. Because what makes a backend developer in a CMS monolithical driven world, right? Is a backend developer to someone who grabs the data, makes it available, but also renders the MVC kind of thing into the templates? Or should a front end developer grab the data from the model and put it in the view? Because now that we have these JavaScript things that do like the view kind of thing,
mhm.
did backend developers get less work now? In my opinion, no, because front-end developers, in my opinion, should grab the data from a model and render a template, in the WordPress style or the Sidecar style. What do you think, Tony?
uh, I define it different. I don't like to separate backend developer from front-end developer. To me, developer is developer, and
Agreed.
you and me,
Yes.
we worked in consulting firms, so we
Yeah.
had we were thrown on different projects, and we had to either write code in JavaScript or .NET or Java or Node. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to stay and continue building websites, you pick up the modern stack. If you want to continue doing your backend stuff, you focus on doing backend stuff and make it available for
Exactly.
the Jamstack sites, for Mac architectures to headless
Yeah. And
architectures. And
isn't it interesting to actually try to do something like a GraphQL endpoint? If I were a backend dev, I would love to try that and make that scalable and see how that works, right? It's very interesting.
yeah, I think the issue, and it's good we were talking about this. The not the issue, but Jamstack is associated with just front end developers, HTML,
Mhm.
CSS, fast blogs, but nobody thinks about the benefits that it can bring to enterprise and to these big projects that have
Yeah,
had issues for years and
exactly.
working with.
Well, I have been there, but I've been privileged to work for bigger brands that just needed performance or specific things done. And then Jamstack was helping out a lot there. So let's talk about markup here. So markup is pre-built at deploy time. This means we are building static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript websites. I think this is probably still true unless you go to single page apps. But is a single page app potentially also maybe in part at least Jamstack? I don't know. It's a static front end, right?
So whenever you're building a single page app, you can have areas of the site with new modern tools. You can have areas of a
Mhm.
site that are static and some are dynamic, but you
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
take that static site and then make a spot of it, because it's all just HTML files in there just sitting
Yeah, but
in
if you
directory.
look at, yeah, but the thing is, let's say I make an Ajax call and I did get some data from a microservice somewhere that would become an SPA, and it's still Jamstack because the client is making those Ajax calls.
Of
It
course.
might not be awesome for SEO, but that's a whole different Jamstack Fridays talk, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go on. So I think we have had a refresher now. So let's talk about what a typical Jamstack architecture actually looks like. So what most people think it is, or at least what they associate Jamstack to be, is probably something like this,
Mhm.
right? So I just chose to put Gatsby there, even though I have a Nuxt hat on, right? Everybody's happy. We're all free. We can choose what we want. So generally, it would be like a static site generator like Gatsby,
Mhm.
getting data from somewhere, maybe even just markdown files. You commit to Git, and then Git, because there's an update, your build system somewhere in the cloud, either Netlify for Cell, MoveWeb, whatever,
Mhm.
they will notice that change, do a build on their own CI/CD stack, basically, and then publishes that to the CDN edge. And that's what the user gets to see.
Yep.
I guess this is like the simplest it gets.
Yeah, that's
right?
elementary. Yeah, how it starts and how
Yeah.
everyone should just at least it's joy. You once you do it
N-
once, you're like, oh my god, this is so much fun.
yeah.
It brings
I
back that
know
fun into web development.
totally, because when I started to do this, I was like, okay, this is like I came from that world where we had the WordPress like websites, the Sidecar like websites, all good, right? That's where you come from. So that's your paradigm.
Mhm.
And then this happened. I was like, hey, why not do it that way? But then what you can actually also do is the following, right?
Mhm.
So you have the Gatsby, you have your Git, you have your build on Netlify, on the CDN, whatever. But there's also this microservices chunk. As you can see, there's like 3 cogs there, basically signaling to the fact that there are multiple of those. So you kind of have client and you have CDN edge, and then you have services.
Mhm.
And you can expand that into anything you'd like, right? Because you can see the arrows pointing from microservices to Gatsby, but the microservice also points to the build. It also points to the CDN edge, and it points to the client. Like there are limitless amounts of things that you can do with these microservices as long as you can just orchestrate them together to do something on the client side.
Correct. Yeah. And we have a
And
backend developer who can find some stuff to do in this diagram and build microservices.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I've worked with a bunch of people around like e-commerce stuff, right? Where they are like commerce tools developers, but I didn't understand commerce tools developers because commerce tools is just a thing with a REST API. That's awesome. But you know what they did? They actually created Lambda functions and services around commerce tools to enhance it and make better API endpoints for front-end developers, for example. And they had a full job, full-time job in projects doing just that. Like the DevOps aspect of it is great. And so when I made this slide in like 2018 or 2019, maybe, I don't know, the Gatsby thing is new. But anyways, I started to use this myself more and more, right? And then suddenly my whole vision of how I saw the internet, it kind of opened up. The
Mhm.
cloud changed stuff, right? And I kind of had this, like the internet was redefined for me.
I don't think I ever seen this show. What is this from a show or
Yeah,
something?
this is like the most UK comedy style show, and
Uh-huh.
so you're forgiven for not knowing this because it's a little obscure, but I love this. So it's called the IT Crowd. So I'm sure some of the people in the audience will have seen this. In the meantime, my cat is trying to climb on my lap, but he's failing. So just give me a second. Anyways, so in this graph, okay, wait, my cat is this is not good. Give me a second. Yeah.
This is the internet. Everything is live.
Everything is live. We're not gonna edit any of this. Okay, so my cat is now released from my leg, back in business. So this TV show is about the IT department of a big company in London. And so the dude that you see is clearly a nerd. He's an IT guy. And then the lady is their new manager. And they're always making fun of her. And in this case, he's showing her that this little box here is the internet. And she actually believes him. So she takes the box to a board meeting and says, guys, I have the internet. And then for some reason, she drops it. And then the whole building collapses. It's super strange. But that's like UK humor, right? It's kind of it's crazy and super fun. But like for me, this just signifies like let's reinvent how the internet works in my mind here. And so it's just this Jamstack opened my career basically. It completely changed how I work. And so yeah, there you go. That's this TV show.
Okay.
Um, let's talk a bit about another architecture that you can also use that still qualifies as Jamstack and hopefully inspires you in the comments or you as a viewer to also do something like this. And if you see this and you think, hey, that's cool, or hey, that's not Jamstack, please let us know. We love interaction.
Mhm.
So meet Fatty.
Yeah, I remember this project.
I did this a while back. So this is 2019, as you can see on the slide here. So I built this app because I was gaining a bunch of weight. And the way I know how to lose weight is there's an external kind of, how do you call this? Like, if people keep me accountable, to me that helps. I'm just a weak person like that. I need accountability from the outside. I need a bit of peer pressure. So
Okay.
I thought, why not take it to the next level and actually build an application to publicly show my weight loss progress? And I did this because I wanted to speak at, or I was speaking at the Front End Love conference in beginning of 2020. And I started this weight loss journey probably 25th of October 2019. And by the time the conference was there, I wanted to have lost a certain amount of weight. And every time I would step on the scale, my app would update and a tweet would go out. So people that knew I was going to speak knew about this thing. So it was kind of a marketing thing for me, but I was also showing people I was losing weight or not. And this is completely Jamstack with a whole bunch of fun stuff in it. So, Tony, would you ever expose yourself like that with accountability, or am I just a little crazy?
No, this is good. Actually, when I saw this, I was thinking, oh, and I bought the smart weight back then. It was Fitbit. I was like, man, I
Oh,
want to do
yeah,
something.
exactly.
I want to do something similar to this. And but this is really, I don't know if I would expose my stuff. But hey, I don't know.
Whatever we do for the Twitters, we do, right? And it was, for me, it kind of worked. I think I lost in the end 6 kilos or like 13 pounds or something like that.
And you
It
got
wasn't
likes,
enough,
and people
but it
were
was,
like, good job.
well,
This is
and
nice.
it helped me. But
Yeah.
also people were like talking to me like, dude, no, you gained weight this week. What's happening? Right? I had my friends tell me. I had like DMs.
They were
Anyways,
watching you. They were watching you
yes.
on the social media.
Yes, exactly. So this website was built in Vue.js. It was a PWA, and it updates itself automatically by using webhooks, right? It's a really nice combination of how you can orchestrate stuff. So it used Vue.js. I used Azure functions, GitHub, Netlify, and it's a PWA. It's a strange combination, but back then it was quite okay, I think. So this is what it does in essence, right? I step on my withings scale. That will then update my PWA with my new weight. So you see a new graph or a new date. And then it would actually send a tweet with my progress. And so people will always know where I was that day or that week. And also, if I didn't step on the scale because I thought I might have gained weight, it would tweet that I didn't step on the scale.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
that's very annoying. So I could not trick it, right? I could not game the system. So let's just go over how I architected this. And it likely won't work the same anymore nowadays, but let's go over it. So this withing skill, what I thought it did initially is when I would step on it, that it would always go to the withings backend, and that would update my phone because my phone would just read the database. That was actually not true. The scale would directly connect to Wi-Fi and update my phone like in some sort of strange peer-to-peer system. And then that would also then update the backend database of withings, which was, I still don't really get how it works. It's likely different now. But anyways, I was able to set up a webhook from withings API to something. And so a webhook is basically if a machine to a machine fires a URL and gives a bit of data, right? Rather than me going and typing into a browser, it's a machine that does that. In this case, it was the withings API. And so we have that little chunk and I just make it small. So there's a webhook to the next thing. And so I had a serverless function or a lambda function, if you will. I don't think Azure likes us to call it lambda functions, but basically what this thing did is very simple. It would receive the webhook with my new weight. So the only thing that withings would send is like 100 kilos or 180 pounds or something like that, right? And then this function would grab that. It would connect to GitHub and then use the GitHub API to do a commit into a JSON file with my new weight.
Nice.
Right? Make sense? It's strange, but that's how that works because there are no databases here. I don't want origins, nothing. Right? So it would actually do a commit for me with the GitHub API. Right? But because GitHub had an update in a specific branch, that would then actually trigger a netlify deploy because netlify was listening to a specific branch. If that branch changes, it would do a build. And then, of course, when you do a build with netlify, their CI/CD stack would rebuild my fatty application, but that JSON file with all the dates and all my weights had been updated now. So the fatty app would show a new weight. And so it's totally static. There's no database actions or AJAX calls because that JSON file was local to the code base. And then what I would also do is make an SVG file that became like the same graph that you saw before, but it would update every time the website was updated because in the build, I created the SVG and I used Cloudinary to make that into a PNG file so I could use it as the share image and update that every time the website would be rebuilt.
Okay. I'm interested in that. I want more. Can you expand on that a little more on the Cloudinary part?
Oh yeah, sure. And the funny thing is, I only used Cloudinary in this sense to not to create the whole SVG. I did that locally in Node.js, but I used Cloudinary because you cannot use a share image like an OG tag image or a Twitter card image as an SVG. Those services just don't understand them. And so what I did, I would use the Cloudinary fetch hook to actually create that image. Right. So what it would do is it's not creating. What it did, it was like fatty.timbenix.com/graph.svg or something. And then for my share image, I would use timbenix.cloudinary.com/fetch / the URL of my graph. But in that same URL, I'd say file type PNG. So what Cloudinary would do is it would fetch the original URL on my origin on timbenix.com. It would make it into a PNG and put that on their CDN. And so that way I kind of decentralized rendering that image into a PNG on Cloudinary. And then my share image would be the whole URL. And then it would just grab it from the Cloudinary CDN for sharing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's just using the tools you have to your ability, right? It's just try and connect as many things as you can. And so we're not finished yet. So we now have an updated app and we have a progress graph. But Netlify itself, after the publication was done, I set up a webhook from Netlify to another Lambda function. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to tweet automatically what my new weight was and what the difference was with the last one. And so this tweet progress function would actually use the GitHub API again. It would go to GitHub and get that same JSON file that we used before. And in there, you have the start weight, you have all the other weights, and you have the dates, because that's what I put into that JSON file with the publish weight function. And so this tweet progress function actually had all the information needed to craft a fun tweet and publish that. Like, Tim lost 1 kilo or 2.2 pounds in 4 days. That's not that much, is it? Well, actually it is much, and it would then also say things like, hey, Tim gained like 2 pounds. What happened? Fun stuff like that. And so I did it this way because I didn't want any sort of database somewhere. The database now is just GitHub, but it's just static. It just sits somewhere. And so this way, there is no origin, there are no servers, because those Lambda functions would be used with an input and an output and just die off again. I didn't pay for those. And so, yeah, that was pretty intense and really simple once you grasp what it does. And then this would be one of those tweets, right? And then when you click on the link, you go to the application.
Nice.
And so that's what I have for you today on this crazy architecture. And so, Tony, what do you think? Is this actually Jamstack?
Yeah, this shows that with Jamstack architecture, you can go beyond just building a static blog.
Sure.
Because in wherever you're adding your weights, you can utilize non-relational database, for example, and then that serverless function you can bring in now into Netlify, and have both of those
Yeah.
functions there because it's so advanced.
I would likely have done quite differently now. I'm thinking.
But one thing also to say that whatever you built 2 years ago or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
now you can easily improve without
Exactly.
rebuilding everything because you were thinking with the right mindset with this
Yeah.
Jamstack Mac architecture, everything decoupled.
Yeah.
So you're not.
Yeah, because now I wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't think I would use Azure Functions now.
Mhm.
Or if I did, I would go to Azure Static Websites or I would host it there, right? But now I would, like, if I didn't want to retouch any code, I would just stick with Netlify and use their Lambda functions inside the same code base. If I wanted to write a bit of code, I would likely use maybe Vercel and Next
Mhm.
and use it's a little bit more integrated, right? But all in all, it would be relatively simple to touch and change any of those. Because now with the Azure functions, I had two separate functions that would do similar things without shared code. I
Mhm.
know in Azure functions nowadays with version 3, you can have shared code. But I guess if you had it all in the same code base, like with Netlify, Lambda functions, or Vercel API functions, right? You have it in the same code base, so it's easier to share stuff. But it still stands, this thing, and it's still pretty fun.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it a lot. And this tells, like, if we have people who are watching this and thinking, how can they take advantage of this architecture, and they're thinking of implementation, one of the main things to keep in mind is that as technology evolves, new tools come out, it's easier to swap and just keep improving stuff without rebuild. Maybe
Exactly.
I'm sounding like a broken record, but
No, but this is true. You don't want to
important.
be re-platforming anymore. It's just that's just from back in the day. There's no longer any need. Ooh, that was a uniform plug. Nice. Anyways, we're pushing time a little bit this episode, so thank you for watching, everyone. If you feel like you have some sort of other architecture that you like, please put it in the chat, and we can maybe talk about that last time. Tony, do you have some words to finish this?
Thank you for sharing this project with us. This is really great, and see everybody soon.
Yes. Cheers, everyone. Bye.